Ninja Gaiden 4 recently had its release date revealed at the Summer Games Fest, promising to arrive this year on October 21st. And whilst I'd say a lot of people are looking forward to the game's release, especially considering it's been 12 years since the last entry, there seems to be some trouble brewing just beneath the surface. The Ninja Gaiden series, like the hurricane it is, recently re-enraptured the action game community, partly in thanks not just to the Master Collection that dropped a couple years back, but also thanks to the remake of Ninja Gaiden 2 that was dropped, or shadow dropped I guess you could say, on the day of Ninja Gaiden 4's reveal. Now, some of the issues with that so-called remake aside, it was a well-learned lesson in just teaching people how brutal Ninja Gaiden could be, particularly in a time where the arbiter of difficulty in games tends to be the Soul series. The game's hardest difficulty, Master Ninja, taught people just what it means to be frustrated when facing a game that seems nigh on impossible. And therein lies one of the bigger issues with Ninja Gaiden 4. The original games were developed by Team Ninja, and it seems as though a lot of the development for Ninja Gaiden 4 has been outsourced to Platinum Games. I think it's fair to say that Platinum Games are certainly heavy hitters when it comes to character action or hack and slash games, especially with games like Metal Gear Rising and Bayonetta under their belt, but those games and their design are vastly different than what you'd expect to see in something like a Ninja Gaiden. If you take a look at the breadth of games that Platinum have developed, be it things like Bayonetta, Metal Gear Rising, or even games like Transformers Devastation, there is an excessively heavy emphasis on parry mechanics or even perfect dodge and dodge offset mechanics. And so one of the most contested sort of pressure points that I've been seeing in the community is this entire idea that because they've onboarded Platinum to effectively take over with the creation of the game, that the entire ethos behind the combat system is going to be something akin to what you'd see in a Platinum game, and not something you'd see in a Ninja Gaiden, for example, where mechanics like parrying or countering are a thing, for example, but they are not the mechanic that the entire combat sort of pivots around. And I think that sort of ties in quite nicely to something that other people have been pointing out in these trailers, and that is the notion that these enemies seem to be far less aggressive, much slower and passive overall. And I think this point could potentially swing both ways. You could argue that because these are trailers, they want to show the protagonist in the best light, they want to see the protagonist kicking ass, they want to be able to give them breathing room to be able to showcase some of the cool animations when it comes to movement and weapons. And I've seen some people even argue that because so many people who are in the community have been playing some of the harder difficulties where you basically have no breathing room whatsoever with enemies, when you play on something that's akin to a normal mode, which is, I'd imagine, what they're probably capturing some of the footage for the trailers on, of course people are going to be sort of slower and more passive just in general. But, playing devil's advocate for a second, if you subscribe to the idea that Platinum are effectively doing whatever they want with the combat system, then this certainly leads credibility to that theory. Personally, I'm in two minds. As is the case with a lot of releases, I think I'll refrain from my final judgments until I actually have hands-on time with the game itself. Anything could change between now and release, albeit things aren't likely to change substantially considering that release is just around the corner, but I'll rest my case there. Scaling things back and looking at this through a broader lens, we have to acknowledge the fact that it's already been 12 years since the last mainline entry in the Ninja Gaiden series, that of course being Ninja Gaiden 3 Razor's Edge, which it in and of itself was already a band-aid on the festering wound that was Ninja Gaiden 3. That game was such a far departure from what people liked in Ninja Gaiden that if I were to just bullet list the points here of what it is that people didn't like about this game, you think I was kidding. This isn't an exhaustive list, but it should give you an idea of the fact that the community does not like substantial departures from what it is that makes the Ninja Gaiden games so great. And with all these promised changes coming up, it's no surprise that people feel uneasy, wanting to avoid a repeat of a Razor's Edge scenario. One other major point, of course, is that we've got another protagonist here to steal the limelight from Ryu. For all intents and purposes, based on what we've seen, it looks like the up-and-coming young ninja Yakumo seems to be the protagonist for Ninja Gaiden 4, and it looks as though they've chucked in Ryu here for good old nostalgia. Yakumo's gameplay and moveset is unlike anything that we've usually seen in previous Ninja Gaiden titles, whereas Ryu seems to be a little bit more familiar, bread and butter with a lot of the combos and sort of moves that we've obviously seen in previous Ninja Gaiden titles. This is also another point of discussion. If you have two protagonists who play wildly differently to each other, Are you going to be able to manage the enemy design to fight differently against these two protagonists depending on who you use? Or are you going to have the enemy AI and design tailored to one specific playstyle, and so whenever you use the other protagonist, things just aren't going to mesh quite well? We've also seen Yakumo use multiple weapons at this point, and we've still only seen Ryu use one, that of course being the Dragon Sword. And so that calls into question, is Ryu going to be able to equip or use or find multiple weapons, or is this going to be another Ninja Gaiden 3 situation where he only has one weapon for the entirety of the game? Based on the blowback that they got from 3 and of course incorporated into Razor's Edge, I'd like to think that Team Ninja are going to avoid that scenario entirely. Circling back to the top of this point though, I can see why people are feeling trepidatious, particularly because you have a new Ninja Gaiden, but Ryu is not at the forefront. He seems as though he's just a side character who's along for the ride here, and that might not be the case. They might be obfuscating things with the marketing material, maybe they're, holding their cards close to their chest, but I can see why some people are reserved on this when we've got a new Ninja Gaiden. The series has finally returned, but it looks as though Ryu truly hasn't. I can imagine that if there was a mainline title that had dropped within that 12-year span, sort of with more of a passing of the torch moment, that people again wouldn't feel so trepidatious, but that's just fruitful thinking. With all of that in mind though, it's not every day that a series goes away for 12 years and then comes back swinging. And if you take a look at how the game's been received at a more wider audience and you step outside the character action / YouTube niche for just a second, you'll see that a lot of people are looking forward to Ninja Gaiden's return. The best case scenario here is that this game sells like hotcakes and we get new and routine Ninja Gaidens being pumped out consistently, and the worst case is that we get another Ninja Gaiden 3 or 3 Razor's Edge scenario, which basically puts the series back into sleep for another 12 years. Before we round off this video, I'd like to leave you with a quote from Ninja Gaiden 4's producer and director Yuji Nakao, which I think is very telling about hopefully where this game is headed. For people of my generation, it feels like the types of games we grew up playing have become a lot less common in recent years. Instead, we've seen the rise of Souls-like games, which have certainly become very popular. When Platinum Games speaks to Team Ninja about Ninja Gaiden 4, we often joke that we've made something that really doesn't feel like a modern game. It's just too hard. These days, games are trending towards being easier to play, but Ninja Gaiden 4 goes in the complete opposite direction. So, don't lose heart. And on that note, I think I'll leave this video there. I myself am not the hugest fan of Ninja Gaiden, but I can appreciate them for what they are, and the specific role they fill, especially when compared to other character action games like DevilNeverCry. Part of me understands exactly where people are coming from, especially considering the DMC series went through its own similar hiatus before its ultimate revival. But another part of me is also cautiously optimistic about the game and hopefully where it can take the series. Let me know what you think down in the comments below. If you enjoyed today's video, do be sure to leave a like and consider subscribing to stay up to date with more Ninja Gaiden 4 news. With all that said and done, it has been me, DevilNeverCry. I'd like to thank all of you for watching, and as always, I'll see you all next video.